So I'll introduce them, give you the, in case you don't know these individuals, let me give you a little background. And I know, you coming up with them now, or are you gonna, I never know what you're doing. So let me introduce them. Sylvia Earle is president and chairman of Mission Blue, the Sylvia Earle Alliance. She is, yeah. It's like I need to go no further, but let me read a little bit more. She's a National Geographic Society Explorer in residence and is called her Deepness by the New Yorker and the New York Times. Living Legend by the Library of Congress, and First Hero for the Planet by Time Magazine. She's an oceanographer, explorer, author, lecturer, and with experience as a field research scientist, government official, and director for several corporate and nonprofit organizations, and a very good friend of Polynesian Voyaging Society. Sylvia, why don't you come on up and have a seat on our stage. Really pleased to meet today Dr. Rick Spinrad. He was sworn in on June 22nd, 2021 as the Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and the 11th NOAA Administrator. NOAA is such a great partner. You want to talk, a lifeline for our canoes. NOAA is really providing that with your technology and services. Dr. Spinrad is responsible for the strategic direction and oversight of the agency and its over 12,000 employees, including developing NOAA's portfolio of products and services to address the climate crisis, enhancing environmental sustainability, and fostering economic development, and creating a more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive NOAA workforce. Dr. Rick Spinrad. Thank you, Rick. I suppose he needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway because of his long service and because we love him. Nainoa Thompson is the president of the Polynesian Voyaging Society and a PO Navigator. He's inspired by his kupuna, his teachers. He has dedicated his life to exploring the deep meaning of voyaging. And if I don't bring them in, he'll be very offended by the introduction that you need to know that he was influenced by Yoshio Kawano, Herb Kane, Maupiailug, his father Pinky Thompson, Lacey Veach, and so many others, and he is always aware that he stands on their shoulders and brings them into every room and every presentation he makes. He's the recipient of numerous community awards, including the Unsung Hero of Compassion, awarded to him by His Holiness Dalai Lama on behalf of the organization Wisdom in Action. He's the Native Hawaiian Educational Association's Manamano Ka'ike, Depth and Breadth of Knowledge, Educator of the Year Award recipient, the NOAA National Marine Sanctuary Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award, the Blue Ocean Film Festival Award, the Peter Benchley Ocean Award for Excellence. And I think if I go on, you'll just embarrass him. So enough already, but let's bring these three really special people who are leaders in our ocean community to the stage and hear what they have to share with us.
I think you know that the navigators of the Pacific are committed to many things, but the protection of the oceans. Because we are in a century of storms, and they're coming every day. And the ocean always changes, but every indicator that we look in terms of health is going the wrong way and fast. And what I'm getting at is that we need to figure out the equation of real change, and who can do that. And the indigenous wisdom over thousands of years is key. But and you may not agree with this, but we need more than that. We need navigators on the planet who are watching this earth. We cannot make the changes in the oceans if we don't see the whole earth as an island. One island in space, it's all we got. It houses everything that we call the family of life, because you can't find it anywhere else. and I'll say this, Mars sucks. The moon's worse. And so we should take care of the only island we got. And in that equation, I knew, and you may not agree with this, we have to have the best eyes on the earth to help us see the systems. And that's why you have the two best navigators on the planet right here. And we need them. I asked them, begged them to be here. Because NOAA, hands down, has the best terrestrial, marine, and space technology to watch the earth. If we can't understand the systems, we can't protect them. And we become one island that's in peril. And so we need the best navigators. And the introduction you should have read was Dr. Spinrad's. Of all of his achievements as a physical oceanographer, is all that he's done in leading enormous amounts of pathways, of movement, of change. And so I just want you to know that I asked him to be here, and I personally am just grateful that he would take the time to be with us as a navigator to show the path. And my understanding is that MOU between NOAA and the Voyaging Society is maybe the first one of its kind, just to open the door to many more. Rapa Nui, Tahiti, Samoa, Aotearoa. We need these relationships, in my humble opinion. And Sylvia, yeah, I mean, you look at Time magazine, there she's in her wetsuit in the front page, leading the way of the top most influential 100 people on the planet to save the earth. She is well, they both are, heroes of mine. And I knew she had to be here. Small room, small people, big camera. The world needs to see what needs to be done. There are no, in my humble opinion, I'm just saying this from the Union of Science and Indigenous Knowledge and importance of conservation. We need to come together to create an equation that's going to stop the extinction of our culture, of our languages, of our practices, of species we'll lose on this earth. We are in the Holocene period, which would be arguably, possibly the most, if we look at the richness of life, and this is Sylvia and Dr. Spinrad's, much better explanation. We're in the most biologically rich time that the world's ever been in, because the world constantly is restoring itself. It's restoring life. And yet, we're at the same time that we're creating the extinction of these species at a rate we've never seen before because of us. So, thank you, Dr. Spinrad. Rick and Sylvia. We both gave them kamakaua nui o Maui, the fish hook carved. And that symbolizes, at least in my humble opinion, maybe people in this room won't agree, but we have to redefine what is the navigator in the 21st century of storms. And we have to be able to broaden that for us to come together as one family. And if we don't do that, in my opinion, we fail. So with that babbling about from me, one thing before he has to leave is that we're very deeply honored and grateful that you made the time. To both of you.
Well, how to follow up on that? Let me first say that I have a deep feeling of imposter syndrome sitting up here on this stage with two of my heroes. I have known Dr. Earle for decades, followed in her footsteps at NOAA, and consider her an icon for so much of what we have been able to do at NOAA. Nainoa and I got to know each other over the last several years. I certainly knew your reputation well and was delighted when I got appointed to this position to be able to try to use the position to say, how can we foster an even more robust relationship? And the question is why? And I'll start that by saying, I have a problem. My problem is in the title that I carry right now. You heard, technically I'm the Undersecretary for, now listen very carefully, Oceans,
Plural.
and Atmosphere. It's not oceans, it's ocean. And we need to be able to find a way to invoke that thought, that approach in everything we do at NOAA and in how we work relationships, whether with PVS, whether with non-governmental organizations or academic partners. And that's so important because, and part of the reason why I'm so delighted to be sandwiched by my two heroes here is that I grew up as a kid in New York with a pretty traditional kind of training. I decided when I was 13 I was going to be an oceanographer because I was fascinated by the science that you could actually predict what waves were going to do and what currents were going to do using fancy algorithms and observations and mathematical models, and followed a very traditional track of being a trained scientist, an academician, working for a variety of different federal agencies. And it wasn't till I got well into my 60s that I realized there were two, if you will, tools in the toolbox that I needed to work on, that we as a technocratic organization, which is really what NOAA is, we make a lot of observations. One was the cultural connection. How do we work with cultures that for centuries, millennia, have learned, appreciated, absorbed understanding of the ocean and everything about it into lives, into culture and society? And I saw what the Navigators, and oh, by the way, what an incredible set of stories we just heard. I saw how that part of understanding the oceans was critical to the mission that we have at our agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The other part that I realized was missing, in addition to the cultural connection, is the emotional connection. And the fascinating thing to me is this icon to my left, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who has been able to literally swim in a variety of different environments, including the technical and political environment that is an agency like NOAA, but more importantly, that emotional enterprise, getting people to understand and feel viscerally what the damage that we have done and are doing to the oceans means in terms of what the future looks like. And so I just want to close out my brief comments here by saying that it's very easy in looking at the cultural considerations and the emotional considerations to get depressed about where we are in the state of the oceans. And don't get me wrong, it can be a very depressing state of affairs. But as I look at the technical tools that we have and the ability to find a connection with cultural understanding, with Ike that can be folded into modern science, and I look at how to pull at the heartstrings of those people, especially young people, I am an optimist because I think understanding cultural considerations, knowing where the emotional connections are, coupling that with I'll brag, the extraordinary technological capabilities that not just NOAA, but NOAA especially, primarily brings to the table. I can look at young people in the eye and say, I think with the knowledge and understanding and appreciation for culture, for science, for the emotional connection, we can actually get to a better place. I like to tell folks I am a climate optimist because I'm a climate realist. And so for me, it is such an honor to share that very personal view with all of you and to try to establish that connection with the extraordinary leadership that Sylvia and Nainoa have exhibited over decades in this space. So Nainoa, thank you. And Nainoa said he asked me, what he didn't say was he asked me once, and I thought about it for 3 microseconds before I said, absolutely. And we were on the deck signing the memorandum of agreement back in November when I got so excited about this opportunity. So thank you for indulging me a little bit of time for me to share my perspectives and how I relish the idea of building the relationships that are represented here on the stage. Thank you.
Well, I hope that's not your last word, because we're supposed to have a conversation here. And I think Nainoa has some very specific questions that he would like to have you address. And I do too. In addition to you two heroes, teachers of mine, I recently, well, it's actually been about 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to sit with another great hero, Bill Landers, the astronaut who took that photograph, that iconic photograph of Earth as an island in a universe that's really not very friendly, not just to us, but to life. And he said, you know, that picture really did make a difference. And I'm so thrilled that I had the privilege of taking that photo, but the photograph that I'm most proud of, and he pointed to it on the wall, it was the blue face of Earth, the Pacific Ocean. He said, that just says everything. Earth is blue. And it's not just the surface. 95% or so of the biosphere where life occurs starts at the surface in 3 dimensions and goes not just to the bottom of the ocean, but even trickles down beneath the bottom of the ocean where there's water. On Earth, there's likely to be life. There's plenty of water elsewhere in the universe, we now know. But you can have water without life, but you cannot have life without water. Another teacher, hero of mine, Ed Wilson, a biologist. His specialty is ants. But he had a profound insight into the nature of life on Earth. He observed in his later years that we, humans, are letting nature slip through our fingers. He, as a witness, David Attenborough as a witness, Jane Goodall as a witness, all of you as witnesses. We're living through a time of extraordinary new insight about the nature of nature of ourselves. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where could we go if we get our act together? We have the best opportunity there's ever been in human civilization to have these enormous breakthroughs. When you look at what we've learned, even in the last decade, let alone the last century, the things that the children of today just know as a part of living that certainly was not a part of my life as a kid, or yours, Nainoa. No one knew what Earth looked like from space at the time. The means of communicating the way we now can was just, we couldn't even dream of being able to pick up a thing in your hand and talk to people and see their images from the other side of the planet. No one had been to the deepest part of the ocean. First time was 1960. 52 years passed before the next journey to go I mean, you say it's a long way down. It's only 11,000 meters, 7 miles. We travel now 7 miles in the sky, millions of people, all the time looking down at the surface of the planet. But we're just beginning to know, as I say to Nainoa sometimes, what's under the canoe? What's down there? We've learned a great deal about what's at the surface. We've learned a lot about the land, who lives there, what lives there. We're beginning to understand what's in the soil that we've been ignoring for most of the history of our species, beginning to get insight into how everything connects and how looking at Earth from high in the sky, you realize all of you, all of people everywhere, all of life on Earth, we're all indigenous to this planet. All of us. We're all connected. All of our history started out there in the ocean. We are so fortunate now in the 21st century to have the benefit of those of you who have come to live in a place, to know a system, to know nature deeply. I mean, through generations. Knowledge that is passed from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, each time learning things about a place. In the case of those of you who represent the people of the Pacific, knowing the ocean in ways that really represent a gift, something that is cause for hope. Hope that we can take the technologies that have been developed, mostly in the last 200 years, especially in the last 100, at an accelerating rate, so that literally in the last 50, we have learned more about the nature of ourselves as a planet in a universe that's not very friendly, that we have acquired by taking advantage of the millions, the billions of minds that now exist. I mean, the increased number of people, that's kind of a problem when Earth is only so big. When you think of the origin of the Polynesian voyagers, going back thousands of years, it took until 500 years to get to 500 million people. 1 billion by 1800. When I came along, there were 2 billion. Now we have 8 billion, and Earth stays the same size. And our appetites, our needs continue to grow, but Earth does not. And that's the dilemma we now face, armed with knowledge that did not and could not exist until right about now. We have the challenge of trying to figure it out. How do we find a place for ourselves within the natural systems that make our existence possible, this living planet? After I heard Ed Wilson say that we're letting nature slip through our fingers, I just had to observe the real problem is that nature could let us slip through hers. We are at this moment in time when we have a choice. We can continue to take from nature, free goods. We call it natural resources. We're the boss of the planet. We should be able to take whatever we want, except now we know there are limits. We're armed not just with knowledge, but the superpower of knowledge. It did not and could not exist until right about now. We can see what our predecessors could not, and the kids are growing up knowing what those who preceded us could not know, that we're right at the edge of either this extraordinary time of prosperity, of solving problems that have are there to be solved if we keep our act together, or we're on the edge of catastrophic decline. We're in that direction right now. But it's not too late, right? Climate optimists. We have the best chance we will ever have. It's going to get worse. The storms are going to get stronger. But we have the power of knowing. If we pull together and have a plan, a sail plan. I love the concept. If we can just agree on the direction and getting all of us to make choices every day about protecting the natural systems that are still strong. We still have half the coral reefs. 10% of the sharks are still around as compared to the level that were there when I was a child. We're really good at finding and capturing and marketing nature, wildlife, land and sea. But now we know that's taking us in a very bad direction. The good news is we know what to do. We do know what to do. We've got answers. We know that if we just shift our position in our habits, we can get through this time. Another one of my heroes, a historian, Barbara Tuchman, said history will not forgive those who were right, but who failed to persuade. You feel that. You know the right direction that we should be sailing. And it's really hard to convince others that this is the way when we have habits, we have laws, we have expectations that suggest we should go this way or that way or some other way, but you really know, you know. I think everyone here has a sense of knowing we have to move together, which is why I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation, where the theme is uniting, coming together with your special kind of knowledge and wisdom and commitment to moving in a direction that will take us to where we want to go. Right?
Absolutely.
How are we going to get there?
I'm going to take that as a literal question, Sylvia, and I think part of it is what you started to allude to, informing people in ways that they relate to. I've got to tell you a story on Sylvia. This is about 25 years ago, but it captures what I think is part of the answer to your question. So Google had just started developing Google Earth. You know where I'm going with this story, I think. And those of us in the ocean community started playing with Google Earth. And when you moved your cursor over the blue part of the Earth, you actually got an error message. And the error message was, cannot handle negative altitude, what we oceanographers call depth. And it was, and all of us were complaining that this was never going to work. It was Sylvia who said to the leadership at Google, you have not created Google Earth, you've created Google Dirt. And it just, so I want to come full circle. I want to tell that story regardless of what the question was, but it's the ability to resonate. As soon as you said that, everybody knew exactly what you were talking about. And oh, by the way, then forces were mustered, then solutions were developed, and within about 6 months, Google Earth was, so we started. Within 6 months, we started to pull in data, and Google Earth became a true rendition of what the planet was. So my point here is, you asked, can we do this effectively? And I think we can. My frustration is, it's not this audience that we need to convince. It's those who don't understand or feel why this is impacting them. One of the true joys of the job that I've got is I get to travel mostly around the United States. I travel a lot, And I remember I was here in Hawaii last April, and we visited Maui and saw the impacts of sea level rise on a number of areas in Maui. Immediately after that, we traveled to Alaska, where I saw in the interior, the roads in Fairbanks were buckling because it was raining in Christmas in Fairbanks. And I came back from that trip and I wrote an op-ed. I called it "The Wolf is at the Door." And the point I was trying to make was that whether you know it or not, whether you are in the most tropical of environments or the most Arctic of environments, you are feeling the consequences of the change that we are seeing. And trying to get every one of those 8 billion people that you alluded to, Sylvia, to understand this is personal. This relates to me. It relates not only to me, but the next 2, 3, 5, 10 generations as well, I think is the key. And again, that's why I think the work of PVS and the agreement we developed is so important, because people understand the longer term implications of what the Voyaging Society is doing. And so I think it's a communications challenge. And I think we have to realize that we have to broaden the cast of actors on the stage here.
Welcome aboard. So the idea that armed with the technology that we have today, nothing is off the table. I mean, everything's on the table, basically. What we take out of the ocean that could not be even found, let alone extracted and marketed. Deep sea mining looms on the horizon because of the technology that cuts both ways. We know what we now know at this accelerated pace, being high in the sky, going deep in the sea, communicating, analyzing, crunching the numbers, seeing what we can now see. But we can also use it to consume the planet at a rate that is unprecedented. I mean, change has always been a part of life, history of life on Earth, from 4.5 billion years ago to the present time. It's constantly changing. But if we want to survive, we need to stabilize the impacts that we have had. And we might be able to adapt on a pace that is more geological in nature, but it's anthropological change that's happening. We're the cause of this rapid change. When I was chief scientist at NOAA, with that vision of Earth from space, the blue face of the planet, it just seemed logical that we had the best chance then, we're talking 1990, more than 30 years ago, to safeguard the high seas. And the mighty power that I had as chief scientist, you have a little bit of authority to pull people together. We were able to gather here in Hawaii representatives from about 30 countries and a lot of US agencies. We called it, I've forgotten what we called it, but it was a conference about protecting the high seas while we had a chance, before vested interests got established, before what we now see. These industrial fishing fleets, we're talking thousands of ships taking with large nets, not to feed families and communities, not to maintain the survival and of your culture. No, it's just extracting on a scale that by any measure is not sustainable. In that time, well, probably going back a little before then, in the 1950s to the present time, the estimates are that on the land and in the sea, we have extracted about half of the mass of life that was there, wild animals, trees on the land. 90% of the sharks, you know, we see it with coral reefs, we see it with seagrass meadows. We basically have half of the resilience of these natural systems that existed when I was a child, when I first began exploring the ocean. And then 1990, to think half the world is beyond national jurisdiction. In fact, the ratification of the law of the sea had not yet kicked in 1990. There was still this flux. And deep sea mining was already an issue. If we could have found a way to say this is our home for all of us, it's our life support system, we should do as astronauts do when they're high in the sky. You need to learn everything you can about the systems that keep you alive, and then you have to do everything you can to take care of them. We've done it, would seem to be just the opposite. We still have a lot more knowledge about Jupiter and Mars than we do about the nature of the sea floor, let alone the water column and who lives there. The deeper we go, the less we know. And I think we're right on the edge of being able to make some breakthroughs. By this time next year, I hope in Tetiaroa there will be another tool in the box, a couple of little submarines that will allow you navigators to see what's under the canoe, at least down to the twilight zone. A gift. We have the technology to go and see and do. The best chance we'll ever have to succeed as a species with a magnified capacity to decide the future of all of life on Earth. I mean, elephants are smart, whales are smart, dogs and cats are smart. Some people are smart. But we, as a species, we're the only ones who can solve the problems that we have caused.
I want to add to that we have sort of a force multiplier, call it a negative feedback in the system as well, in addition to all of the issues and troubles that Sylvia alluded to. We have what I think the columnist Tom Friedman described it best. He called it global weirding. And you think about what's going on. And that also has anthropogenic origins, but just look, a couple of years ago, we had a tropical cyclone Mawar end up in the Bering Sea. You don't get too many tropical cyclones in the Bering Sea. We had Hurricane Harvey drop 5 feet of rain on Texas. Last year, at NOAA, we keep track of these things. The metric we use, it's really unfortunate that we actually have this metric. It's the metric of billion-dollar weather and climate-related disasters. In the 1980s, in fact, when you were chief scientist, we would typically have 3 or 4 of these a year. And even with inflation adjustment, last year we had 28. $28 billion disasters just in the United States. And when you fold that into this mix of things we've got to deal with, it's really a challenge to stay optimistic or realistic, except for the fact that I honestly believe we've got the skills and capabilities now to get in front of and do some adaptation. And before you jump out of your seat, Sylvia, I want to make sure it's got to be about mitigation, mitigating the causes of all these changes. And we will do that, but that takes time. We need to adapt and be more resilient right now. What do we need to do in Maui in response to sea level rise? What do we need to do in the Pacific Northwest in response to ocean acidification? What do we need to do in response to the fact that, like I said, roads are buckling in the interior of Alaska, or some of the Alaska Native tribal communities on the coast of the Bering Sea are going to have to move, up and move. And we see the same thing throughout Pacific Islands, Caribbean Islands, Indian Ocean Islands. This has serious implications. Can we get in front of these curves? Can we use our knowledge well enough and appropriately enough to make decisions about adapting and becoming more resilient as we're mitigating?
Yep, I'm jumping out of my seat to go do what you say. Let's do it. Everybody should be jumping out of their seats.
Maybe I want to agree with both of them. When Shorty and Bruce talked about we started knowledge at zero because we forgot 100% in an education system that did not allow in Hawaii. Hawaiian culture and language in 1926 by policy was outlawed. And so that road of extinction was well paved, primarily because of our schools. And my father would be first generation, he's nearly pure Hawaiian, that would not be taught language or culture or genealogy. Who are you? By knowing where you came from. Because his parents, my grandparents, felt that if he tried to be who he was, he's going to get hurt. The road is well paved, so when I graduated from high school, I don't know where Tahiti is. It's not even a word in my vocabulary. There was no stories of canoes. Aotearoa, Te Rangihiroa, Peter Buck, wrote a book called The Vikings of the Sunrise. It was sitting on the Bishop Museum, but it was not in a single school. The story was there. We could have chose to educate, but we didn't, right? So when we talk about, Shorty talks, Bruce talks about the zero. We were at complete zero. And what's so terrible about that, that if Hōkūleʻa did not get launched, if there were not founders that would give a young generation the canoe and trust they'll take care of it. If Piailug didn't come, by the hand and pull us through the window of time into the old ocean that nobody else on the planet could do. So in many ways, if you're thinking about Sylvia's and Rick and Mao, they're same status, in my opinion. These are the great navigators of our time. And starting at zero was truly zero. And Mao, he didn't come and say, okay, I'll be here for 28 months with you guys every single day. I'm going to teach you everything and sit down, you guys, and get out your pencil and paper. I'm going to lecture you. Here's your textbook. Here's the syllabus. No. Just get on the ocean with him. Me and Bruce were commercial fishermen. Sorry, Sylvia, but we were. We quit. Don't jump up and down your seat, okay? But my nets are still hanging up at my house. Not because I'll ever use them, but to remind me, why did I quit? And I want my kids to see those nets, to know whose dad was, to make a choice. I don't catch fish anymore. And off we go at net zero with Piailug on board, who doesn't have a verbal syllabus. There's no textbook. There's a star compass. It's an ingenious tool to memorize where you are on the earth. And without that star compass, anybody will say that they can navigate without it? Awesome. Awesome. Typical sunny day, good weather, no storm. There'll be Piailug on his feet for 22 hours a day. Sleep maybe 6 times at 20 minutes. You can set your watch by his pattern how he slept. Clear your mind, get back up, because you only know where you are, memorizing where you come from. If you're what do you memorize? You're memorizing nature. How do you do that? You observe. So he's making, in a day, he's making 5,000 observations of nature. He's got to understand it to make choices. Trim this, trim that, constantly balancing the canoe into the wave. End of the day, you'll make 2 decisions. Where are you? And where do you need to go? I'm bringing up this story because that's what you're saying. It's about us making decisions. Every one of us make decisions. What we need in unity is a movement towards sharing stories. Jack, thank you. So that other people can make decisions, better decisions. You need these 2 navigators to be able to give us the information and the inspiration. And I'm going to stop talking today. I know there's questions that Lehua has, but I don't think we need them. What we need to do is let me be quiet, because most of you know me and you're sick and tired of me talking. And then, and the other is that I have so much respect for these ones that I think you need to hear the story. So Neil, thank you for the introduction and allowing me to be up here. But if you don't mind, I'm just going to be quiet and let them talk to you, because their job is so crucial to help us be able to make the decisions. 8 billion people. Wa'ahonua is our tool. Jack put a declaration out here. It's not an option, it's kuleana to share your story. And we have a mechanism that we call Wa'ahonua that can carry these stories. Each of your stories are decisions that you make because you're declaring your relationship to the oceans. So our primary job is just it's a movement that's happening. It's a beautiful movement. It's the most extraordinary movement. Our worldwide voyage taught us one thing, that, the earth is changing, we're in trouble. We change it, it's changing us. We don't know what to do until now. And then it also said that just, we're kind of, we went up, what was it, Bruce? The Hudson River, then up some canal, the Erie Canal, then we ended up in the Great Lakes. We went over 62 locks up to 2 mountain ranges. The canoe kept going higher and higher. And then we went to Montreal. Why? It was to find a woman in a village called Kawanake, who would be a retired nun. That would be the first woman to open up the first indigenous language school on the planet. Immersion. Hawaii, Peter Wilson, Larry Kimura were fighting against the system, did not want that language in our schools. And so that lady came to Hawaii and testified to the Board of Education, to our state legislatures, and bam. At the time when she was testifying, the guess was that Native Hawaiian speakers fluent were less than 100. Less than 100, and their elders, no child. The road is well paved. All we got to do is exterminate that one generation, and it's all gone. We're at 22,500 today. And so we know that we can stop extinction. This lady was heroic for us. And I would like to turn the rest of the day, the limited time we have, to these two great navigators. And I'm just, Neil, please, I'd just rather be quiet about this and let them just talk. Lehua, if you want to ask the questions, it's fine. But I'm just going to back down out of respect to them and what I think is the most valuable way to use time. Thank you.
So you have more dialogue you want to drive here, or would you like to have questions from the audience? What's your pleasure?
I'd love to hear from the audience, but I have one very quick story you reminded me of, if I can, I know. And it's a piece of this, I alluded to it earlier, and it's the role of the younger generation. I want to tell you a story about a person I met in Tybee Island, which is just off Savannah, just a while ago. This person, her name is Liddy, came up to talk to me about plastics in the ocean. And Liddy had started her own non-governmental organization, was doing some fundraising. She had written 2 books about impact of plastics on sea turtles, and was in the process of developing another program that she was hoping she would get sponsorship for to save sea turtles. Lydia is 9 years old. 9 years old, and she lectured me on microplastics correctly. And I just bring that up because that's the other part that gives me hope. And I want to make sure that we pay very close attention to the role of youth and not simply say, congratulations, appreciate that you like this. 20 years from now, you too might be able to sit at an important table. We need to bring youth into the discussion, literally, a seat at the table. Some people say, yeah, what do we have to lose? No, it's not what do we have to lose. It's what are we not gaining by not having them at the table. So I just want to throw that out there too, because I think it is such an important component of the solutions that you alluded to, Sylvia.
Right. I mean, think about what the kids know that nobody could know before, that you didn't know when you were 9 years old, that nobody could know. But that's part of the reason for optimism. I have a great grandson who's just over a year old. He has a pretty good chance of being around to greet the next century. So I'm not so worried about history not forgiving all of us. I'm worried about my grandson, great-grandson, not forgiving me or us, all of us. We know what to do. What's holding us back? It's customs, it's even the laws that reinforce expectations, bad behavior. Legal fishing is one of the biggest problems. Subsidizing the extraction of wildlife from the ocean, not even thinking of ocean life as wildlife, but really as commerce, things to be used, not just for consumption of people who really need to take from the sea, but just as something that you can take like the deep sea nodules because they're there. And if you can get them and sell them, why not? So I think the answer to this dilemma, what do we do, is there for every one of us to ask every day. Because I cannot tell you what to do. I can tell myself. I can say, here are the problems. Which piece of it am I going to work on today? But like you, I want to hear from.
Do we have questions for our panelists?
Or we start asking you questions.
There's a hand up there. There's another one. There's another one.
Neil in the back.
I'm sorry, this mic doesn't work.
Hello, my name is Nainoa from here on the east side. Thank you for being here, to all of our panelists. I was just wondering, I do think just listening to the Navigators start first, right? Navigation is not the learning circles that I've been in, but I have been in other learning circles. And I feel like EK or wisdom takes time. And, all the stories that they share, right? Many of them started in the neighborhood, so it's decades of lived experience. And so even though we have more information and more data, so often things are moving so fast and we're fighting against, I think, like convenience and just having intellectual knowledge instead of actual wisdom. And so I'm just wondering, any thoughts that you have in terms of maybe leaning too hard on data or what we know, what we should know, versus, right, social fabric of our communities that will allow our navigators to be the men that they are, right, to be connected with nature over decades and be able to pass that on. And so I feel like it's convenience, right? We have a lot of data, but it's convenience and attention. And how do we slow things down where we're actually producing another generation of like navigators in whatever discipline and sector that is, right? Where they're given decades to have that knowledge like sink into their skin and understand what that is. So I'm just wondering what you guys think of convenience and how quickly the world is moving. And social media is great, but it's also distracting, right? Our attention from really rooting into sitting next to elders, to spending days and months, and years really learning.
I'll dive into that question. Because I think we saw some of the answers sitting on the stage here this morning. People telling their story. You can relate to, with empathy, sitting and seeing from the standpoint of others and being inspired, perhaps, to see what you can do individually and what maybe you can inspire the next person. It's contagious. It should be cool to care. Right now, it's kind of cool to kill. We have this huge investment in destructive behavior. And I don't mean just wars on one another. I mean wars on nature. And I think the story that James Cameron told in Avatar about our relationship with nature, with an amazing story. Sigourney Weaver's here as one of the storytellers, an actual participant, talking about the tree of life, talking about unobtainium, that mineral that really was considered useful, desirable, and useful for civilization to power on to new levels of prosperity, but at great cost. And when you see what we are doing to nature to power our way, what seems like to new levels of prosperity, look at us as compared to where civilization was 100, 200, 1,000 years ago. It must be good until you realize the cost. And this is maybe the first time we've been able to look at the balance sheet in a way that gives us the capacity to make choices. Never mind what the law says. If you know that this is the right thing to do because you're taking care of the system, singular, earth, ocean, singular, one ocean, one interacting system of life. We're all connected. And we have the best chance ever. I tell kids how lucky they are to be 21st century human beings because it's the best chance we will ever have. It's going to get harder. But if we get it right, just think of what the future can be. We still have the best chance ever. Stories. Well, I want to know what all your stories are because I know you have them.
Rick, I know you want to add to that?
I love that you framed the question around the issue of convenience. And I would say the answer to that is trying to get people to understand the consequence of decisions. So I also love that we framed this whole discussion around navigation. Those of us who've been to sea know that when you're far out to sea, certainly the navigators know this, the slightest change in rudder orders, direction, can have great consequences for what your destination is. And so if we can get, especially young people, to understand that these decisions that we make now, even if it's based on just a little bit of data, but it's good quality data or information or knowledge, will have a long-term great consequence. There's this whole genre of films where we say, imagine if we could go back 10, 20, 100 years and make a slight change to history. What would be different now? Well, you know what? We're in that stage right now. We can make those small changes now, and the consequences will be dramatic downstream. So it's, I think, trying to move away from the issues of convenience, as you alluded to them in your question, and more to getting decision makers, we're all decision makers, but especially young decision makers, to understand what the consequences of these decisions might be.
Remember when I said I wasn't going to talk? Well, to Naya's question, when you talk about the role of science and the other important roles, I go back to Mao. Remember that sunny day? He's out there making 5,000 observations of nature to make 500 choices about a rudder or a sail or balancing, weight distribution, moving water jugs. To make two decisions. Where are you going to go? You only know where you are by memorizing where you come from. That is your history. And now we need to see our future. Imagine that, what if every human being on the earth made 500 choices a day? That would be 4 trillion human choices a day. What if they're good ones? And I think that's the steering sweep that's missing in the equation is values. What is the culture of humanity? How would you define that? What is the culture of the navigators? Jacko talked about it. Others talked about it. Mao wanted to give us po. We didn't want to take it because how can you be responsible for something you don't understand? Something so deep, language you can't speak. And Mao, when we talked about we don't want to do it, he said, I'm not asking you guys to do it. So we asked him to help us, before we get inducted, help us to understand what it is we're responsible for. So he took 2 days with a guy by the name of Lambert on Satawal. They had a small little solar panel, and they had like a typewriter thing, and they wrote 14 pages of po. And they gave it to me. It burned in a house fire, my house fire in 2008. I lost it. But I will leave you with the issue about po. The first 13 pages were all about skill, all about knowledge, all about responsibility. The last paragraph was exactly what Jack talked about, that po is the light. And the light is love. When there's conflict, you resolve. If the bird is hurt, you heal. You go out to sea to get gifts for your island. You come back, you take care of the island and the community. Po is the light, and light is love. Verbatim. Never forgot. I think he is telling us that the movement we need is a human values movement. It's to understand what really is important for things larger than ourselves. And that's why I think, I know these navigators for 40 years. But to hear the stories today, it's rich, it's deep. It's in family, it's in generations, it's in. There was so much light in the room this morning. And the light's in Rapa Nui. Thank you for having the courage, the intelligence, the brilliance to do one thing that had to happen before you could get the greatest marine protected area on the planet. You had to unify. And that took a decade or 12 years or 14 years. Thank you for fighting for us. What you did for you is not just for Rapa Nui. It's for all of us that need to, in the black of the storm, is to see the starlight. And that's the same for Aotearoa. You have no idea how much you've influenced me is trying to find out who I am. Because you guys didn't forget. If people wanted to give my father land to build on Marae, because there was 6 tribes of Taitokerau, Hōkūleʻa sailed there, and he wouldn't take it. You know why? Because you guys fought for that land, and we can't be responsible for it. That's my father. And to every other island group, Fanny, all you guys from Tonga and Samoa are doing great work. And there's so much starlight in the room. But I would say the starlight comes from the lens and the view of a set of values that somehow we agree on. That's beautiful, but not the rest of the world. Much of the world doesn't. That's our job. The renaissance and the revolution we need is a cultural renaissance. It's a values renaissance. But even that's not enough. We need to have the great navigators. And Joe Williams is here. He's hero. He's the highest peak of leadership. Honor, Joe. Thank you. And on and on. I'm going to stop there. If I forgot Richard Bailey and Titi Aroa and all that they're going to do, and Hinano and Frank. I mean, there's starlight in this whole room. I can go on and on and on. What if we came together? What if we agreed on a common set of ancestrally tested values and we just keep growing the movement? And we can have, and I do, almost every night I go to sleep last. Kind of not now. My kids are teenagers. They're killing me. But they're kind of killing me right now. But I'll go into their bedroom and I'll see how well they're breathing. Do they feel calm? Are they safe? Then I'll go outside, look at the stars, and sometimes I want to cry because I don't know if I can protect them. And so, yes, we deal with the wave of the things, the reality that makes us so depressed that sometimes I get on my hands and knees and want to just cry. But at the same time, we have great navigators here, and we have great navigators in this room. What if we come together?